You know, I've got a thought that I know we're in the middle of this recap, but I think this occurred to me in the second episode. I think it's kind of important, and I haven't researched it, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Uh-huh.
Does this show have any actual connection to the Scream movies? It's not in Woodboro.
Not so far. I haven't heard anything.
Not the same place, not any of the same characters. They're inventing their own mythology, their own backstory. That's why they have Brandon James. They're not using a built-in backstory from all the previous murders, which is interesting because that makes it's not like a remake, a sequel, a reboot, a reimagining. They're basically just taking the general feel, idea, and character archetypes from Scream and just doing it again in a different venue.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is what kind of bothers me about the show thus far. I'm hoping it wears off a little bit. Now, I don't expect there to be any big connections, but it's fine if there are. I'm not going to complain if there are connections to the original series, at least like the Stab movies exist in the universe or something. It was what we were talking about earlier with name recognition.
Yes.
I'm worried that it literally is just something that's like called itself Scream and then is basically just going to play slasher conventions with like disregard for being
and just using a couple of Scream elements.
Yeah, that's one thing that is already starting to worry me is that it doesn't feel like Scream.
No, it doesn't.
In the more pivotal way that it's like what it feels like is one that I'm worried that it's not made by horror fans, for one. And two, it's not made by Scream fans. So, it's made by people who think they understand the appeal of Scream, which is, it's someone killing people in a mask, and the teenagers are self-aware and meta. It's like Scream was more than that. Scream was the calls on the phone, the taunting, the stalk sequences.
Scream was an amazing movie of suspense.
And a whodunit. And they're doing that at least well, but I mean, that's every slasher, basically. But what I'm also talking about is the idea that, like, what I was hoping to get out of this show was what teenagers think nowadays of horror movies and horror conventions.
And the show doesn't. And the show doesn't know.
They don't do that ever.
Yeah, they don't know.
They're just teenagers who are getting whatever, and they talk about TV a lot. So it's more of a satire of TV and a slight satire of slashers, as opposed to how I go on about trying to write and research the show. Would have at least been interviewing kids nowadays and be like, have you seen the original Scream? What horror movies do you watch? Do you watch them on YouTube? What are your favorite horror movies? Do you like the new stuff that like we all think is crap? Like When a Stranger Calls? Is that becoming the new thing? And like people don't like Evil Dead and Halloween. You know, I want to know what the teen culture thinks of horror movies nowadays. And especially me and Dylan were talking about this. Scream took all of the established rules from the 80s, basically, then subverted them. So are teenagers nowadays used to the subverted rules as the new rules?
This is a great point, but what makes the first Scream such an amazing movie is that it does that. It highlights all the tropes and rules from slasher movies that everybody already knew. Mm-hmm. It has fun with them, but it still obeys them. It still respects those rules. It just does it in a new way. The first one works on so many levels is that it acknowledges the rules, and then it almost feels, well, that's why they're the rules. They're inevitable. This is how it plays out every time.
Right.
The show so far isn't really working on...
Well, see, this is the thing. That brings me to the point that I don't think it's written by horror fans, let alone slasher fans, let alone Scream fans. Because... the original was how none of the kids in this movie, like other than Randy 2.0, and he even barely does it, talk about horror movies. Like,
yeah, just once or twice.
That's a big fucking part of Scream was for horror lovers, was talking about horror movies.
And, you know, something that a big gaffe that the show did, and not only was the line in the first episode, but they repeated this line in the second episode, is when Jamie Kennedy says, Slash can't work as a TV show because it burns fast and bright, and that's how it is.
Right.
Well, so far the show is proving it. I mean, the show is, and it keeps telling me the line, and it makes me think, hey, yeah, I'd thought that anyway, but you guys know that Slash isn't going to work as a TV show. Mm. And so far, you're not doing anything to prove that wrong.
This brings me to the other thing that I'm scared of, is that, like I said, it's not written by horror fans. In the way that, like, they specifically go out of their way in the first episode to point out that they don't talk about horror. They specifically use the word gothic. Mm-hmm. It's like these people are the kind of writers who are like, we don't like horror movies. Sure. We want this to be a gothic detective, but fuck you, this is a slasher. Like, don't hide the fact that it's horror. Kevin Williamson had seen all of those 80s slashers, so he knew what had been done, what hadn't been done, what was an actual cliche, what people think is clever, but it's from people who don't watch horror movies, so they don't realize that a lot of bad movies have already done this. And I don't think that they know that. So I'm worried that we're sitting through a 10-hour-long prom night. Are okay for what they are, but in the realm of, like, slashers, they're kind of, like, weak.
Based on the first 2 episodes, it doesn't feel like a horror show. It feels like an MTV show about the problems of teenagers, and there's a murderer running around. So, I didn't have the stopwatch, but I want to say that for the first couple of episodes, total, there was about 10, maybe 12 minutes of actual horror between the two, and that happens, this is another thing that I'm going to see what develops with the show, is episode 2, there was horror at the beginning, there was a really nice suspenseful scene at the very end.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
And everything in between was basically just teenager stuff.
Right.
So it almost made me think that they're pacing the show for binge watching. Just so something interesting happens at the end of an episode, something interesting happens at the beginning of an episode to keep you jumping to the next one. But in between, all through that long middle part, there's not going to be very much other than, oh my God, did you hear what Jennifer said? Oh, yeah, Jennifer's such a bitch.
Yup. But see, the thing is I'm pretty sure by it being 10 episodes that they're structuring it more like a movie, because it breaks down to fit into the idea that it's like episode 1 is the first 10 minutes of a movie, which is you set up the catalyst, what ends up happening. Then the hero doesn't get involved until 25 pages in, which would be the equivalent of episode, I guess, 3. So, in the next episode, it should be that the girl gets fully involved in it. Like, John McClane, they take over the building, he hides, then he fights the guy 25 minutes later. So, is the next episode, if they're following movie pacing, it would go, the next episode, she either gets targeted specifically in an attack, which Sydney does at 25 minutes into Scream, that's when he comes out of the closet at her, or he comes after someone she loves a lot, and basically in the third episode there's going to be a part where she's like, we have to find out who this killer is.
Makes sense. And that is very logical, you're in all likelihood right, but oh my God, if you are right, I pray you're not.
Because, I fucking hope I'm not either, because that's bullshit.
It's interminable. There's a very good reason that movies aren't 8 hours long.
Yep.
Pacing a show like this, serialized storytelling, is way different than pacing a movie. Like, your episodes have to have a beginning, middle, and end. They don't have to give you answers. If you're looking at 10 hours with a beginning, middle, and end,
yeah, wow. What I'm feeling is that it's going to be more of a slasher movie spread out.
Bloated. Which is,
and literally that's all.
Is the worst possible call, because as a huge slasher fan, hopefully you will agree on this, as much as I love slasher movies, pretty much their biggest shortcoming is characters. That's the reason slashers are always made fun of, for just being populated by archetypes.
Right, but that's why I kind of like the idea of a show, is like, if they do start developing the characters better than they are,
well, if you're going to
prove them wrong.
But, I mean, slashers are known for having bad characters, and so far the show has given us archetypes and not one compelling character on the show. I'm not saying I hate everybody. Some of them are fine. Some of them are meh. There's nobody I actually give a shit about on this show. Not one person. Mm-hmm. And that's after 20% of your show is in the can. I've seen 2 out of 10. I should at least have a fan favorite.
Yeah. And so that's just what I'm scared of. It's like, you'll know if this show's going and poorly written. Hopefully maybe they'll subvert it, but I don't know. Is the idea that, so if it follows movie pacing, yeah. So 3, they'll finally get involved. Because, yeah, they've been passive about the whole thing. It's happening in the background. They'll get specifically involved, and they'll go out on a mission to figure out who this person is. And then on episode 5, which would be halfway through, everything's going to switch on us. And what is actually relevant will be revealed. So, oh God. And the other thing is factoring that in, episode 7, at the end of episode 7, it should end with literally the main chick saying, "I'm coming after you now." That would be if it's badly written. Is like, right. You're no longer chasing me, I'm coming after you, credits. If that's how 8 ends, we're in fucking trouble.
I think we'll know long before then whether
exactly.
we're in trouble.
Because the thing
we're skating on thin ice as it is.
If you don't reveal the killer until the very last episode, that's going to be fucking lame. Like, at least reveal one of them, like, halfway through. Because that's what I always thought was cool about Scream, and I wanted to see Scream extended, like, Back to the Future-wise, is, like, it would be cool to see what Billy and Stu, how they orchestrated, where they were, and who put on, I want to see that. So what they should do is halfway through, reveal who the killers are, and then the episode, you follow 2 narratives, which is the killers trying not to get caught and the people trying to find them, and weave it all around and together. That would make it interesting. We've never seen a slasher do that because they don't have enough time to do that.
Sure.
Or, which brings me to my other point, is ideas that slashers have always wanted to do but didn't have enough time for. Kevin Williamson specifically, in his original script for Scream 2, had the killers being Miss Loomis, Mickey, Haley, and Cotton Weary. So he upped the killers from 2 to 4, and I believe it was 2 separate entities killing individually, and they didn't. So it was too convoluted, and they were like, you can't have that many killers in a movie.
Yeah.
But a TV show, maybe you could.
Definitely.
And so what I'm thinking it could be is like there are multiple killers. And what would be interesting, and so far just after 2 episodes is all, but still the theory holds up so far, is that it's dominoes, which would be interesting. So the girl took the video of the 2 making out in the car. So the blonde chick goes and kills Nina from the first one. And then someone else now has killed her. Because it's an interesting thing that I've never seen in slashers either, is that if someone came to your town and was killing people like with a mask on, and you were like, well, I hate this motherfucker, I'm going to just kill them in the same MO and get away with murder.
Mm-hmm.
So that it would compound like that, and either people don't know each other are killing, so everyone's killing for individual reasons. Anyway, so that's kind of what would be cool. Again, if it's just ends up being that it's the sheriff is the bad guy,
very possible,
and that he has a son who like is somehow the main chick's real brother or something, and they've been killing together, and it's that guy who's like way too good looking for fucking the earth with the fucking hair and shit.
Mm-hmm.
The bad boy who's like the sheriff's son, quote unquote. And he was set up that, my parents died 6 weeks ago in a car crash. But if you look at cast list or just their names on the badge and him, whatever, they have different last names, but he said it was his dad. So that would be the lamest slasher thing in the world. We've seen that way too many times.
Yeah, which makes it pretty likely.
I fucking hope not. Because, again, that's people who haven't seen slashers thinking, that's clever. Be like, no, that's how every bad slasher is. Anyway, so that's all the stuff I'm scared might happen.
That's the other thing is this early in the series, they're still setting everybody up. So we haven't been given, I don't feel I've been given enough clues to even speculate yet. Because really, it could be anybody or half of anybody.
That's what I'm saying. Is like, I can't quite stick to one just yet, but that's the one good thing I like about the show is like last night, just to whatever for this, I did as much research as I could into a lot of like different stuff. How big is this actor to the role that they're playing and blah, all this stuff. And all of that time, all that searching, all that stuff led me to, after these 2 episodes, it literally still could be anybody.
Yeah.
But scientifically, now I know that they're playing their plot threads similarly enough that everybody has the equal amount of.
And there'll be multiple killers, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them shoot the works and inject a little I Know What You Did Last Summer in there as well.
Well, that's what I'm worried. I still Know What You Did Last Summer is what I considered. I was like, this is 10 years way past its time to show that the killer has an illegitimate son. And
yeah,
that's what I'm worried it's going
to.
Yeah,
it seems heading right in that direction.
And that is going to fucking piss me off. That is the lamest shit ever.